Uh, so we've gone through the lineage. We spoke about lineage last week at length. So now we are on to here. Qusay ibn Kilab, he had 4 sons and 2 daughters. Abd Manaf, Abd ad-Dar, Abd al-Uzza, Abd Qusayr, Takhmur and Barra. So these are the girls. So we're going to see Abd ad-Dar, Beni Abd ad-Dar, and Abd al-Uzza later on. Like these are, these are kind of like other tribes. So we have Kilab ibn Qusay, etc. And then it says Abd Manaf, whose name is Al-Mughira. He had 4 sons, Hashim, Abd Shams, Al-Muttalib, their mother being Atika bint Murra ibn Hilal ibn Falij ibn Dhakwan ibn Tha'laba ibn Buhtha ibn Sulaim ibn Mansur ibn Ikrimah, and Nawfal, whose mother was Waqida ibn Amr al-Maziniya. Okay, so we're going to see, so this is why we have Bani Hashim and Bani Muttalib, right? These are these two tribes I'm talking about. So this is Muttalib. So now we're going on to the whole story of the Zamzam. So he says, while Abdul Muttalib was sleeping in the sacred enclosure in the Haram in Mecca, he had a vision in which he was ordered to dig Zamzam, which is a depression between the 2 idols of Quraysh, Isaf and Na'ila, at the slaughtering place of Quraysh. Jurhum, who had previously been in charge of the Haram, had filled it in at the time that they left Mecca. It is the well of Ishmael, the son of Abraham, where God gave him water when he was thirsty as a child. His mother went to seek water for him and could not find it. So she went up to As-Safa, praying to God and imploring aid for Ishmael. Then she went to Marwa and did the same. God sent Gabriel, who hollowed out a place in the earth with his heel where water appeared. His mother heard the cries of wild beasts, which terrified her on this account, and she came hurrying towards him and found him scrabbling with his hand at the water beneath his cheek while he drank, and she made him a small hole. So here, notice he mentions no chain of transmission whatsoever. He's not mentioning his sources. He's just saying this happened, right? Um, and I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying that he doesn't mention any sources. And then, obviously going back to things like Sid Ismail and Ibrahim, right? How would he have a chain of transmission? And so there's 2 questions. How would he have a chain of transmission, and how useful would that be, right? So what would it look like? It would be like, here's Muhammad ibn Ishaq, right, in the year 200, saying that my teacher said, that his 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 teacher said, right? Going back, all the way back to Sayyidina Ibrahim. So that's what it would look like, a chain transmission, right? And then I asked the question, how useful would it be? It'd be fairly useless because you wouldn't know anybody, you wouldn't know who those people are anyway. So it doesn't really make it's not very useful. So when we're looking at a chain of transmission, I need to know who you are. I need to know you're reliable, you have a track record of making mistakes, what's going on. But if it's just a name, like what's the difference between nobody and a name that I don't know? Nothing. You know? Doesn't really mean that much. So, um, that's quite an important thing, right? Quite an important thing. So I remember, you'll find, for example, rabbis today, they have a chain of transmission for their Bible, right? So they have a kind of ijaza, so to speak, like they've memorized the Torah from somebody else who's memorized the Torah all the way back to Moses, right? And they have a chain transmission. But the chain transmission is meaningless because these people are not known. Or there's no criticism of them. You know what I'm saying? Like criticism meaning, so if we look in hadith narration, be like, oh yeah, so and so made a mistake here, so and so made a mistake there. This person, when he would narrate from so and so, he would do this. So they would like, there's actually some details that I'm working with, as opposed to he was a good guy, he was religious. You know, it doesn't actually mean much, does it? It's just it's fairly pointless. It doesn't actually give us any, you know, it's fairly useless. So here he's not giving any source. Like, what is his source for that story? Allahu A'lam. So it says Jurhum and the filling in of the well Zamzam. So it's the story of Jurhum, of their filling in the well and of their leaving Mecca and of those who ruled Mecca after them until Abdul Muttalib dug Zamzam. And then he's going to mention his actual source. He says, according to what Ziyad ibn Abdullah al-Bakkay told me, on the authority of Muhammad ibn Ishaq al-Muttalibi. Okay, so here as well it says, he's saying, who's actually speaking now? He said, who's me? Because if Muhammad ibn Ishaq, we're supposed to be reading his book. So Muhammad ibn Ishaq, he's supposed to be the author of this book. But here it says, so-and-so told me that Abdullah, that al-Bakka'i told me that Muhammad ibn Ishaq told me. So who's this me here? Who can remember? Who got the
Ibn
Sira?
Hisham, man.
Ibn Hisham, exactly. So if you remember, right, what what this book is supposed to be is the book of Ibn Ishaq. Ibn Ishaq, he has a Sira. One version reached Ibn Hisham, and Ibn Hisham edited some things out of it. So we shouldn't even be hearing these names, right? But the issue basically is that we're actually seeing Ibn Hisham's work. This is actually from Ibn Hisham, right? So this is a tweak of it, right? So anyway, so he says that Muhammad ibn Ishaq al-Muttalibi is that when Ishmael, so he just quotes him, that's the authority. Again, there's no chain there. So he says that when Ishmael, the son of Abraham, died, his son Nabit was in charge of the temple, the Kaaba. Notice he calls it the temple, right? He doesn't call it the house of God, right? And that's quite interesting. He calls it the temple. The Kaaba is the temple, right? So notice the rhetoric. We call the Kaaba the house of God, Allah's house, right? But we call it the Temple of Solomon. So imagine you're an English speaker and you're like, Allah has a house in Saudi Arabia, but Solomon has a temple in Israel, right? Which one sounds more like real? The house of Allah in Saudi Arabia versus the temple of Solomon in Israel. Like the language that which one sounds like more real to you, or more like?
The temple sounds more grand.
Yeah, right. So it's important to understand that the Jews, what they've done, uh, and the Orientalists, what they've done in kind of cahoots, in kind of team, is intentionally make Muslims and Arabs sound stupid, and make sure that things are translated inaccurately or they're translated in a certain way. They come through into English in a certain way. So make sure that, for example, Jews talk about God, whereas Muslims talk about Allah. You know, so like and you know, case in point, my neighbor, okay, my neighbor in England, he's a little kid. He's in like second grade, third grade. He's doing comparative religions, and he's actually learned about divorce in Islam, like that there's rules of divorce, okay? And he was like, there's this, that, and all these different things. But it didn't click in his mind that Allah was God, right? But if you're talking about, but so basically, their mind, Allah is not God, but the God of Israel is God, even though the God of a Jew and the God of a Christian is not the same God. You know what I'm saying? So it's structured in a certain way where you can kind of see the same things, right? One looks like it's part of us, the other one is part of them, even though they're actually three separate things. Does that make sense? I mean, either they're all God or none of them are, or one of them is God and the other two is not, because this is two different things. Okay. Similarly, you know, who knows which Middle Eastern country played in the European Football Cup, Soccer Cup?
What was the question? Which European country?
Which Middle Eastern country played in the European Soccer Cup?
Oh, Israel.
Israel, right? Like that's like beyond stupid, right? So it's not like Turkey. Turkey is between Asia and Europe. It's like you are not in Europe. But again, these alignments. So it's interesting here. He translates it as the temple. It doesn't translate it as the holy house. You know what I'm saying? The sacred house, right? Baytullah, the temple of God, right? Imagine if you translated that as Baytullah, the temple of God, right? It has a different sound in English, right? And this is all intentional, right? Go ahead, Yusuf, you're going to say something?
No, no.
Okay. So anyway, he says that again, when there's no change, he just says this is what happened, right? Allahu alam. So he says that that Nabit was in charge of the temple as long as God willed. Then it was in charge of Mudad ibn Amr al-Jurhumi. The sons of Ishmael and the sons of Nabit were with their grandfather Mudad ibn Amr and their maternal uncles of Jurhum and Qatura, sorry, Qatura, who were cousins, being at the time the people of Mecca. They had come forth from Yemen and traveled together, and Mudad was in charge of Jurhum. Um, and Samaida, one of their men, was in charge of Qatura. When they left the Yemen, they refused to go unless they had a king to order their affairs. When they came to Mecca, they saw a town blessed with water and trees. Delighted it and delighted with it, they settled there. Mudad um, ibn Amr with the men of Jurhum settled in the upper part of Mecca in Quwayqi'an and went no farther. Samaida with Qatura settled in the lower part of Mecca in Al-Ajyad, the lower part of Mecca, and went no further. Mudad used to take a tithe from those who entered Mecca and from above, right? They had to pay, while Samaida did the same to those who entered from below. Each kept to his own people, neither entering the other's territory. When Jurhum and Qatura quarreled and contended for the supremacy in Mecca, then it happened. At that time, Mudad had with him the sons of Ishmael and Nabit, and had the oversight of the temple as against Samaida. They went out to fight each other. Mudad from Quwayqi'an with his horsemen, making for Samaida equipped with spears, leather shields, swords, and quivers, rattling as they charged. It is said that Quwayqi'an was so named for that reason. I don't know, to do with the sound, whatever. So Maidat went forth from Ajyad with horse and foot, i.e., foot soldiers, and it is said Ajyad got its name from the fine horses and jihad that formed Samaida's cavalry. The two parties met at Fadih, and after a severe battle, Samaida was killed and Qatura humiliated. It is said that the name Fadih was given him for that reason, right? He was humiliated, right? Fadiha, humiliation. Then the people clamored for peace and went on until they reached Matabikh, a ravine above Mecca. There they made peace and surrendered the authority to Mudad. When he was in power and held sovereignty, he slaughtered beasts for the people and gave them as food. The people cooked and ate, and that is why the place is called Matabikh, the place of cooking. Some learned people allege that the name was given by Tubba, who spoke about before, had slaughtered there and given the food away, and it was his base. The dispute between Mudad and Sumeda was the first open wrong committed in Mecca, at least as some allege, right? So basically, the first violation of the sanctity of the place, basically. Then God multiplied the offspring of Ishmael in Mecca, and their uncles from Jurhum were rulers of the temple and judges in Mecca. The sons of Ishmael did not dispute their authority because of their ties of kindred and their respect for the sanctity, lest there should be quarreling or fighting therein. When Mecca became too confined for the sons of Ishmael, the tribe, they spread abroad in the land, and whenever they had to fight a people, God gave them the victory through their religion, and they subdued them. Okay, the tribes of Kinana and Khuza'a get possession of the temple and expel Jurham. Afterwards, Jurham um, behaved high-handedly in Mecca and made lawful that which was taboo, that which was sinful, haram. Right? He's going to use the same word, taboo, for ihram. Somebody who is in taboo, he will use this translation. Those who entered the town were not of their who were not of their tribe. They treated badly, and they appropriated gifts which had been made to the Kaaba, so that their authority weakened. When Bani Bakr ibn Abd Manat ibn Kinana and Rubshan of Khuza'a perceived that, they came together to do battle and drive them out of Mecca. War was declared, and in the fighting, Bakr and Rubshan got the upper hand and expelled them from Mecca. Now, in the time of paganism, Mecca did not tolerate injustice and wrong within its borders, and if anybody did wrong therein, it expelled them. Therefore, it was called the Scorcher. And, and Nas, and I think it's, not sure if there's seen, not sure there's a word here. Nasa. It's called the Scorcher. And any king who came to profane, i.e., kill somebody in, etc., its sanctity died on the spot. It is said that it was called Bakka because because it used to break the necks of tyrants when they introduced innovations therein. So Amr ibn Harith ibn Mudad and John, who brought out the two gazelles of the Kaaba, presumably had two. I don't know if we've seen that before. The two gazelles of the Kaaba. Not sure what this is. And the cornerstone, and buried them. Now maybe this is a term I don't understand. Some kind of it doesn't mean a gazelle as an animal. Some kind of part of the Kaaba. And the cornerstone, the black stone, and buried them in the well of Zamzam, going away with the men of Jurhum to the Yemen. They were bitterly grieved at losing the kinship of Mecca, and the above named Amr said the following. So these are basically, so as we see, he keeps, whenever something happens, he's trying to back it up with some kind of cultural reference. There's a song, there's a poem, there's something that goes with these things, right? And as you also mentioned, a lot of this poetry is baseless in reality, right? It's not actually, has no, right? So here it says 100. Does it have a footnote there? It doesn't have. Maybe at the end of the chapter, maybe the end of the book, whether or not this poem is actually real, right? As we remember, Ibn Hisham, he edited out a lot of the poetry in Ibn Ishaq because he said this is baseless. Nobody who knows poetry has ever heard of some of this poetry, right? So Amr ibn Harith, remembering Bakr and Rubshan and the townsmen of Mecca whom they left, he mentioned the following lines. The despotism of Khuza'a in the custody of the temple. Then Rubshan of Khuza'a controlled the temple instead of Bani Bakr ibn Abd Manat, and the men who were controlling it being Amr ibn Harith al-Rubshani, the man. Quraysh at that time were in scattered settlements and tents dispersed among their people, Bani Kinana. So Khuza'as possessed the temple, passing it on from son to son until the last of them, Hulayl ibn al-Habashiyya ibn Salul ibn Ka'b ibn Amr al-Khuza'i. The marriage of Qusay ibn Kilab with Hubba, daughter of, so this is what, 2-3 grandfathers up from the Prophet ﷺ, with Hubba, daughter of Hulayl. Qusay ibn Kilab asked Hulayl ibn Hubshiyya for his daughter Hubba. Hubba. Hulayl agreed to get and gave her to him, and she bare him. She bore him, isn't it? Is my English off? She bore him, Abd Dar, not sure. Um, she bore him Abd Dar, Abd Manaf, Abd al-Uzza, and Abd, slave. By the time that the children of Qusay had spread abroad, increased in wealth and reputation, Hulayl died. Now Qusay thought that he had a better claim than Khuza'a and Bani Bakr to the control of the Kaaba and Mecca, and that Quraysh were the noblest offspring of Sayyidina Ismail ibn Ibrahim and the purest descendants of his sons. He spoke to Quraysh and Bani Kinada, asking them to drive out Khuza'a and Bani Bakr from Mecca, and they agreed to do so. Now Rabi' ibn Haram of Udhra tribe, the tribe of Udhra ibn Sa'ad ibn Zayd, had come to Mecca after the death of Kilab and had married Fatima bint Sayal. Um, and it says Zuhra at that time was a grown man and stayed behind while Qusay had just been weaned. Rabi'a took Fatima away to his land and she carried Qusay with her and subsequently gave birth to Rizah. When Qusay reached man's estate, that's an interesting translation, reached puberty. When he reached man's estate, he came to Mecca and dwelt there. Thus it was that when his people asked him to join them in the war, he wrote to his brother Rizah, who shared the same mother, asking him to come and support him. Thereupon Rizah set out, accompanied by his half brothers Hun, Mahmud, Julhuma, and all sons of Rabi'a, but not by Fatima, together with a number of Quda'a among the Arab pilgrims, having agreed to support Qusay. Khuza'a alleged that Hulayl ibn Hushiyya had joined this on Qusay, had enjoined this on Qusay when he saw how his daughter's children had multiplied, saying, you have a better right to the Kaaba and to rule in Mecca than Khuza'a, so that this was the reason why Qusay acted as he did. But this is a story which we have not heard from any other source, and only God knows the truth. What's Ta? What does this mean?
Tabari.
Tabari, right? So we have Muhammad ibn Ishaq in the second century. Okay, we have Ibn Hisham narrating from one of his students, his Sira, and then we have Tabari in the 3rd, 4th century narrating from his students, and so we can corroborate their information, right? So we look in one history of the world by Tabari and say, oh, he has the same information from the other person, but sometimes it's different. So he says here, there's added information that Tabari has that Ibn Hisham doesn't have. He says when the people assembled in Mecca and gone to the Mawqif on Arafah, completed the Hajj and come down to Mina, Qusay assembled his possessions and his followers from his own tribe of Quraysh, the Bani Kinana, and such of Quda'a as were with him. There only remained the ceremony of dismissal, right, which is Tawaf al-Wada'. Oh, so it says here, Sufa, whoever that was, used to send people away. That was a thing that there was a ceremony of dismissal, right? When you finished Hajj, there was a certain group of people who would send people away, something like that. Wallahu a'lam. Al-Ghawth's authority over men on pilgrimage. Al-Ghawth ibn Mur ibn Ud ibn Yats ibn Mudar used to give permission to men on pilgrimage to leave Arafah. And this function descended to his children after him. He and his sons were called Sufa. Al-Ghawth used to exercise this function because his mother was a woman of Jurhum who had been barren and vowed to Allah that if she bore a son, she would give him to the Kaaba as a slave to serve it and to look after it. In course of time, she gave birth to Al-Ghawth, and he used to look after the Kaaba in early times with his Jurhum uncles and presided over the order of departure from Arafah because of the office which he had held in the Kaaba. His sons carried on the practice until they were cut off, right? Until they until they were cut off, until their lineage was lost. Um, anyway, lines of poetry to that kind of effect. Yahya ibn Abbad ibn Abdullah ibn Zubayr narrates from his father, Abbad, who said, so again, this is very loose. He's saying, one of my teachers narrates that from one of his fathers, who was not alive at that time, or is just generally aware of the rituals of Hajj in before Islam, he said, Sufa used to send people away from Arafah and give them permission to depart when they left Mina. When the day of departure arrived, they used to come to throw pebbles, as we do, and a man of Sufa used to throw for the men, none throwing until he had thrown. Those who had urgent business used to come and say to him, "Get up and throw, so that we may throw with you." And he would say, "No, by God, not until the sun goes down." And those who wanted to leave quickly used to throw their stones at him to hurry him, saying, "Confound you!" Right? What's your problem? Get up and throw. But he refused until the sun went down, and then he would get up and throw while the men threw stones with him. So it's interesting that we don't throw at night. We throw the stones when we throw the Kaaba is between Dhuhr and Maghrib. So not sure if it's connected. Allahu Alam. When they had finished the stoning and wanted to leave Mina, Sufa held both sides of the hill and kept the men back. They said, "Give the order to depart Sufa." No one left until they had gone first. When Sufa left and had passed on, men were left to go on their own way and follow them. This was the practice until they were cut off, until their lineage was unheard of. After them, the next of kin inherited. They were Bani Sa'd in the family of Safwan ibn Harith ibn Shijna. It was Safwan who gave permission to the pilgrims to depart from Arafah, and this right was maintained up by them up to Islam, the last being Karib ibn Safwan. So this is one of the many rituals that they added to the rites of Hajj. Okay. Adwan and the departure ceremony at Muzdalifah. Hurthan ibn Amr the Adwani, the Adwanite, was called Dhul Isba', the one of the finger, because of having missing a finger. That's a whole load of poetry there. Since the permission to depart from Muzdalifah was with Adwan, as Ziyad ibn Abdullah al-Bakkai told me on the authority of Muhammad ibn Ishaq. So again, we're reading Ibn Hisham here. We're not reading Ibn Ishaq. They used to pass it from father to son went until the last of them when Islam came. Abu Sayyara Umayla ibn Az'al, about whom a certain poet said, da 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 da. Abu Sayyara used to send away the people while sitting upon a she-ass of his. This is why he says, making, there's a phrase in Arabic, making his ass pass safely, right? His donkey, right? Some kind of phrase in Arabic, which is basically he used to sit on this thing and send people away from Muzdalifah. His words, um, some phrase, a judge who gave decisions, refers to the above name. The Arabs used to refer to every serious and difficult case to him for decision and would accept his verdict. Once it happened that a case in dispute in reference to a hermaphrodite was brought to him. They said, "Are we to treat him as a man or a woman?" They had never brought him such a difficult matter before. So he said, "Wait a while until I have to look into the matter. For by Allah, you have never brought me a question like this before." So they agreed to wait, and he passed a sleepless night turning the matter over and looking at it from all sides without any result. Now he had a slave girl, Sukhayla, who used to pasture his flock. It was his habit to tease her uh, uh, when she went out in the morning by saying sarcastically, "You're early this morning, Sukhayla." I don't get the sarcasm. Oh, you're not really that early. And when she returned at night, he would say, "You're late to come. You're late tonight, Suhaila," because she had gone out late in the morning and come back in the evening after the others. Now, when this girl, so when it says girl here, right? It's like in America, you know, the racist term you say boy to a black person, right? So they had these words jariya and ghulam for a slave. Jariya is a girl, but it doesn't necessarily mean she's a young. It just means a female slave, right? And ghulam meaning a boy, but it doesn't mean it just means a slave. So this female slave saw that he could not sleep and tossed about in his bed. She asked him what his trouble was. Get out and leave me alone, for it is none of your business, he retorted. However, she was so persistent that he said to himself that it might be that she would provide him with some solution of his problem. So he said, well then, I was asked to educate on the inheritance of a hermaphrodite. Am I to make him a man or a woman? By God, I do not know what to do, and I can see no way about it. She said, good God, merely follow the course of the urinatory process. Be as late as you please henceforth, Suhaila, i.e., judge by with how does he urinate? Which what how what body part does it come out of? Be as late as you please, Suhaila. You have solved my problem, she said. Then in the morning she went out to the people. He went out to the people, gave the decision accordingly. So interestingly, this is a story. Okay, so this is just a story that comes here. But interestingly, um, that is actually the fatwa, right? And this is basically the primitive um, kind of way of judging gender that at least some fuqaha use, right? At least some fuqaha use, right? So it's interesting that it comes in the story here, and it's also going to be quoted in certain hadith as well, right? That's why is that important? Because sometimes stories become hadiths, right? And sometimes hadith become stories, right? I.e., people make mistakes, and they will turn a story into a hadith, right? Weak narrators will narrate it, and suddenly there's a story, and now suddenly it's a hadith, right? And vice versa. Sometimes it's not a story that didn't happen in Jahiliyyah, but then it will be created into a story based on a hadith or based on a verse of Quran or based on something. That makes sense, right? So it's important to understand. So what it means then is when we're looking at hadiths, I want to know what the Prophet said. I also have to know what everyone else said because sometimes it can be uncannily similar. You know what I'm saying? Like that's really interesting because somebody else said almost the exact same thing. And sometimes there's coincidence, sometimes there's a reason for it, sometimes it's actually a genuine mistake. That this is a fatwa of a Sahabi. Like I'll give you an example. Like Siru ala sayri ad'afikum, right? That's a phrase in Arabic. Travel at the speed of the slowest. So it's made into a hadith. People will quote it as a hadith, but it's not a hadith, right? Similarly, the fatwa of Sa'id al-Musayyib. So Sa'id al-Musayyib, the great Mufti of Medina, the son-in-law of Abu Hurairah. Okay, he saw somebody praying and they weren't praying properly. They were like moving around in a lot of prayer. And so he said, had his heart had khushu', his body would have khushu'. Like if his heart was humbled, his body would be humbled. I.e., the fact that he's moving around in prayer means he's not focused properly. That became a hadith. You will see that as a hadith somewhere, right? Right. Let me just quickly Google it. Low. Uh, it's quoted as a hadith. Low khasha'a. Yeah. لو خشع قلبه لخشعت جوارحه. Right. So it says here. This is on a website. Is this hadith sound or not? Okay. So it's a hadith that's quoted, but in reality it's fabricated. And the correct version is actually the words of a tabi'i. It's not even words of a sahabi. It's the words of a tabi'i. So this is a classic thing that you need to know. So you need to know things like, oh, I've heard this story, heard that story, heard this quote, heard that, and you realize, hang on a minute, that's that's not correct. That's somebody else. That's a totally different quote. That's that from some other person, right? So it's just interesting here that this story has them solve this fiqh problem, and then the question of inheritance, right? Did women even inherit in the Jahiliyyah? So perhaps they're trying to work out should he slash she inherit or not, right? But it'd be a bit funny if it was like, how should she inherit? Well, if she wouldn't inherit anyway, so kind of a bit off. You know what I'm saying? And so it's possible, not impossible, that this is a fatwa from the Prophet ﷺ or from one of the Sahaba, and then it retroactively became part of this story of the past. Allahu A'lam. Okie dokie. Where do we get to? So how Qusay ibn Kilab gained power in Mecca, how he united Quraysh, and the help which Quda'a gave him, the tribe of Quda'a. In that year, Sufa behaved as were accustomed. The Arabs had borne them patiently since they felt it a duty in the time of Jurhum and Khuza'a when they were in authority. Qusay came to them with his tribesmen from Quraysh and Kinana Quda'a at Al Aqaba, right? That's where the final pillar, saying, we have a better right to this authority than you. So Tabari adds, they disputed one of the other and they tried to kill him. Severe fighting followed, resulting in the defeat of Sufa, and Qusay assumed their authority. Right? So notice how they're vying for power and religious authority at the same time. It's one thing, right? Thereupon Khuza'a and Bani Bakr withdrew from Qusay, knowing that he would impose the same restrictions on them as Sufa had done, and that he would come between them and the Kaaba and the rule of Mecca. When they withdrew, Qusay showed him hostility and gathered his forces to fight them. His brother Rizah ibn Rabi'ah with his men from Qada'a stood with him. Khuza'a and Bani Bakr came out against him, and a severe battle took place in the valley of Mecca, and both parties suffered heavily. Thereupon they agreed to make peace, and that one of the Arabs should arbitrate between them. They appointed as umpire Ya'mar. There was Ya'mur. So anyway, I'm not sure if it's necessarily Ya'mar. So obviously, the translator he's dealing with Ya'mar, right? So he needs to go back and find out, is it Ya'mar or Ya'mur? I know the name is Ya'mur, so I don't know it as Ya'mar. So anyway, Allahu A'lam. Ibn Auf, Ibn Ka'b, Ibn Amir, Ibn Layth, Ibn Bakr, Ibn Abdi Manat, Ibn Kinana. His verdict was that Qusay had a better claim to the Kaaba and to rule Mecca than Khuza'a, and that all bloodshed by Qusay was to be cancelled and compensation disregarded. But Khuza'a and Bani Bakr must pay blood wit, the blood wit, which is what's it called? The diya, to pay blood money for the men of Quraysh, Kinan, and Quda'a, whom they had killed, and that Qusay should be given a free hand with Kaaba and Mecca. Ya'mar ibn Auf was immediately called Al-Shaddakh because he had cancelled the blood wit and remitted it. Notice here, the footnote here. So the point was important because a male received double as a female. Is that what happened in the Jahiliyyah? You know what I'm saying? Sounds a bit odd. Thus, Qusay gained authority over the temple. Uh, and that happens a lot. Okay, so those people who's in the Muwatta class. Anybody here in the Muwatta class? No, nobody here is in the Muwatta class. But anyway, so it's interesting, right? So in the Muwatta, Imam Malik narrates from Nafi' from Ibn Umar, so super sound chain, that he said, um, what was it? I'm mixing the two things up now. That he said, ah, that he said, um, what was it? With on when fasting, you have to intend before Fajr, right? So in the Muwatta, Imam Malik writes with a very sound train transmission that this is the words of Ibn Umar. Elsewhere, you will find that as a hadith. Okay, so you're like, oh, is it a hadith as the Prophet or is it the words of a Sahabi? Right. Sometimes, again, a small error comes and people make mistakes and they'll change a fatwa of a Sahabi into a hadith, right? And there's a very, very significant scenario of that, which we'll talk another time, right? Which is it's called Hadith al-Turba in Sahih Muslim, where arguably, and this is quite significant in reality, where arguably the words and teachings of a rabbi convert to Islam, Ka'b what's his name? Ka'b forgot his name now. So what happened was there was this rabbi who became Muslim, and he would frequently teach next to Abu Huraira. So now somebody's there in this class, and they're hearing Abu Huraira speak, and hearing him speak, and they mix it up. Allegedly, it's not agreed upon. And so what happened then is basically these words of Ka'b al-Ahbar, he's called Ka'b al-Ahbar, Ka'b of the rabbis, basically is some kind of biblical or apocryphal biblical source, accidentally became a hadith, and that's now in Sahih Muslim, right? So that's very extreme. And so there's a number of reasons how we work that out. One of them, or allow how why it's alleged. One of them is the content is really funny. Like it just the description of the creation is not in keeping with the Quran and other hadiths. It's actually different. That's number one. And then number two is that you follow the different versions and you realize all these people are quoting this as the words of this rabbi, right? So he's not even a Sahabi, right? So what's happening then is basically Bible has become hadith or some version of the Bible or some kind of Jewish sources has suddenly become a hadith, right? And that's quite important. That is extremely rare, but the point is our scholars were very, very sensitive to that because it could happen. It did happen sometimes, right? When I say it did happen, meaning it was alleged, not that everybody accepted it, right? خير. Thus, Qusay gained authority over the temple and Mecca and brought in his people from their dwellings in Mecca. He behaved as a king over his tribe and the people of Mecca, and so they made him king. But he had guaranteed to the Arabs their customary rights because he felt that it was a duty upon himself, which he had not the right to alter. Thus, uh, thus he confirmed the family of Safwan, Adwan, and the intercalators. Right. So intercalators are the people who changed the calendar. Right. So the calendar keeps getting changed. That was something they kept. And Murrah ibn Auf in their customary rights, which obtained until the coming of Islam, when God put an end thereby to them all. Qusay was the first. Uh, hmm, the first of Bani Ka'b ibn Lu'ay to assume kingship and to be obeyed by his people as king. He held the keys of the temple, the right to water the pilgrims from the well of Zamzam, to feed the pilgrims, to preside at assemblies, and to hand out the war banners. Right? So he has this authority. And notice he has the right to water the pilgrims from the well and to feed the pilgrims. So this is a key thing in the Jahiliyyah, right? Is that power and freedom comes with social responsibility. The hur, the free man, defends the clan and feeds the clan. That's what it means. This is a part of the in the Jahili world. So the idea that you're cheap and you support your own interests is really off, you know. And I just anecdote. I just want to pause for a second. So that's that concept anyway. Is that the Jahiliyyah? This is how the Jahili Arab would understand things. That tradition is good. Part of tradition is polytheism. We don't want to change tradition, but generosity is good, right? That's important, right? So if you can imagine the Quran, particularly in these Meccan surahs, saying like they don't feed the poor, you're not talking to people who you're not talking to people who don't believe in feeding the poor. You're talking to people who believe in feeding the poor, or at least many of them do. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not a new concept. It's not a new concept. It's something that the Jahili people would do, but some of them wouldn't. Right? Does that make sense? Like it's like saying, hey, imagine for example in the West, like we accept drug abuse. Like that's fine. Like you can be a drug addict, it's not a problem, but we accept it. So then a prophet comes and says, don't do that. And they're, oh, that's strange. You know what I'm saying? As opposed to like in the West, we don't accept drug abuse. It's not something that's socially accepted. It happens, but we don't accept it. So then somebody comes and tells you, it's like, yeah, we already it's a vice that we already acknowledge as a vice, right? So not helping the poor was something that's already an issue, right? And you'd even have like Robin Hood poets, right? Robin Hood people, right? In the Jahiliyyah, people who are basically um, uh, bandits who would get money and give it to the poor. So the whole idea that there's no social, the need for social justice was very much there in the people's minds, right? Before the coming of Islam. Okay. In his hands lay all the dignities of Mecca. He divided the town into quarters among his people, and he settled all the Quraysh into their houses in Mecca, which they held. People assert, it is alleged, Allahu alam, that the Quraysh were afraid to cut down the trees of the sanctuary in their quarters, but Qusay cut them down with his own hand and through his assistance. Quraysh called him the Uniter because he had brought them together, and they drew a happy omen from his rule. So far as Quraysh were concerned, no woman was given in marriage, nor married, no discussion about public affairs was held, and no banner of war was entrusted to anyone except to his house, in his house, where one of his sons would hand it over. Right? So if a woman's going to get married, he is in charge of that. Right? When a woman reached marriageable age, she had to come to his house to put on her shift. The shift was split over her head in in his house, and then she put it on and was taken away to her people. His authority among the Quraysh during his life and after his death was like a religious law which could not be infringed. He chose for himself a house of meeting and made a door which led to the mosque of the Kaaba. In it, the Quraysh used to settle their affairs. Abdul Malik ibn Rashid told me that his father said that he heard Sa'ib ibn Khabbab, the author of Al-Maqsura, not sure what that is, reporting that he heard a man telling Umar al-Khattab when he was caliph the story of Qusay, how he united Quraysh and expelled Khuza'a and Bani Bakr from Mecca, and how he gained control of the temple and the affairs of Mecca. Umar made no attempt to gainsay him, didn't go against him. So that's what I'm trying to say. So and so told me that so and so said that he was explaining to Sayyidina Umar this story, and Sayyidina Umar, who was also known to know about history and things, didn't go against him. Qusay, and then Tabari adds, Qusay's authority in Mecca, where he enjoyed great esteem, remained uncontested. He left the pilgrimage unchallenged because he deemed it a religious taboo. You can't change things. The Sufa continued until they were cut off in the family of Safwan ibn Harith ibn Shijna by the right of inheritance. Adwan and the Nasa of Bani Malik ibn Kinana and Murrah ibn Auf continued as before Islam. So Nasa is delaying the months until Islam came and God destroyed all of these offices, right? So you've got to understand now, you're messing up society. Islam came along and said, we're going to ban these things, and these, these authorities, these privileges are taken away now. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically mentions that in the Quran. جعلتم سقاية الحاج, right? وعمارة المسجد الحرام. When Qusay's war over his brother Rizah ibn Rabi'a went away to when Qusay's war was over, comma, his brother Rizah ibn Rabi'a went away to his homeland with his countrymen. Concerning his response to Qusay, he compiled the following poetry. So again, the same discussion there. Is it real? Is it not? Wallahu alam. And it continues as well. Qusay ibn Kilab said, I'm the son of the protectors, Beni Lu'ay. In Mecca is my home and where I grew up. Mine is the valley of Ma'ad, as Ma'ad knows. Its Marwa I delight in. I should not have conquered. I should not have conquered had not the sons of Qaidar and Nabit settled there. Right. So basically, it continues there. Okay, we'll continue inshallah from here. Inshallah. So again, as I mentioned to those who came new, so Santiago, Muhammad as well, the first 3 lessons, please listen to them, inshallah. Helps us understand, the relative historical value of this book, inshallah. Okay, sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.